for being here today. Certainly appreciate the interest. Today, we are here to announce the findings of our 8-month special examination of the Kentucky Horse Park. Now, what we found overall is during the timeline of our examination, the horse park was poorly run with little or no basis for major decisions on things like the amounts charged for hosting signature events at the park. We also found questionable practices and potential conflicts of interest relating to the operations and sponsorships at the park, which is why we are referring the full report to the Executive Branch Ethics Commission. Now, poor management and lack of oversight have contributed to the need for over $24 million in general fund transfers to support the horse park over the last 10 years. In other words, the taxpayers of Kentucky have been left holding the bag when it comes to propping up the park. Now, the Kentucky Horse Park Commission plays an important role in the tourism economy of the Commonwealth by highlighting our signature industry, and that is why it is critical for the current horse park management along with tourism cabinet to fully address the issues we have uncovered. Now, it is not appropriate for the taxpayers of Kentucky to be on the hook for a park that is capable of generating more revenue and reducing cost, especially considering the current situation with the funding of our public pension systems along with other budget demands. Now, my office decided to conduct our examination after receiving requests from State Senator Damon Thayer, who Senator Thayer is here somewhere over there, State Senator Damon Thayer, Finance Cabinet Secretary William Landrum, and Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Secretary Don Parkinson. Now, I want to thank the current Executive Director of the Horse Park, Laura Pruitt, for her cooperation with our staff during this examination. Ms. Pruitt also brought several items to our attention she had discovered that are reflected in our findings. Now, our findings are based on the examination of the horse park activities between July 1st, 2013 and June 30th of last year. As we mentioned earlier, the horse park has not generated enough income to cover the expenses, which resulted in $24.8 million in transfers from the general fund since fiscal year 2007 to help the park break even, as of course illustrated in this chart. Now, as our report documents, the park's management did not analyze ways to maximize revenue and reduce expenditures in areas like venue rentals and food services. We also found that controls over the park's financial operations were weak, which left it susceptible to potential waste and fraud. For example, we looked at 75 contracts for event and food services. 80%, let me say that again, 80% of the food service contracts were not billed in accordance with the contract agreement. Some contracts were billed higher than the agreed upon amount, and others were lower. Now, food service staff at the park informed us that documents supporting these contract modifications were shredded after the events were completed. This not only violates state policy, it is certainly poor practice, and it leaves the food services at the park at risk of waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, additionally, 46 of the 75 contracts that were reviewed required a deposit that was never collected by the park. We also found 15 instances where a flat rate was used for venue rental instead of a daily rate, with no documentation regarding whether the amount was enough to cover the actual cost of using the facility. Now, our auditors estimated the park potentially missed out on over $600,000 in additional revenue for the 3-year period we examined due to providing a discounted or flat rate on 15 of the contracts that we sampled. We also identified some contracts that required perks be provided to 3 private groups that have a relationship with the horse park. For example, a third of the contracts we examined required free tickets be provided to Kentucky Horse Park Foundation for events held in the Alltech Arena and access to the event organizer's hospitality room during the events. Now, 25 of those contracts required the same benefit be provided to one Horse Park's major sponsor, and one contract required the free tickets to be provided to two sponsors of the park. Now, this ticket arrangement benefited the foundation and other private entities with actually no direct benefit to the Commonwealth. Now, another area of concern identified in our exam involves the park's procurement of services. KHP failed to properly bid or contract with several vendors, including a company that has provided fuel to the park since 2010. That company has received over $473,000 in the past 3 fiscal years with no contract in place. Additionally, the fuel vendor's salesperson was a board member of the entity that organizes one of the largest events in the park, which creates the appearance, of course, of favoritism. Now, in another case, we learned that a contractor hired as a consultant to the park's gift shop also supplied merchandise for sale in the shop without going through the normal competitive bidding process. Now, Horse Park management were aware of potential conflicts because of the merchandise was initially being sold to the park under the business name of that very same contractor. Now, we also found potential conflicts of interest related to billing. For example, one horse show production company that frequently holds events at the park was given a flat rate for park facilities. The discounted total was more than $766,000 for events held just in 2016. This company is owned by the in-laws of the park's food service director. Now, in our interviews with Horse Park employees, we learned the company had received flat rates going back to at least 2006. Invoices to the company would be reviewed by park management in place during that time, and in the words of one employee, management would basically say, quote, "Take the red pen to it." Now, in addition, we found the same company had show equipment and trailers housed rent-free on park grounds without any documented approval. Campers owned by the food service director's wife and one of her employees were also kept on the park's ground at no cost. We also found that in fiscal year 2016, the former deputy executive director lived on the Horse Park grounds in a house and paid only $250 a month for rent. Our findings about personal benefits at the park also extended to sponsorships. One sponsorship in particular provided a personal benefit to park management. The Horse Park has a sponsorship agreement for the use of 2 vehicles for the park. These vehicles were provided and used full-time by the former executive director and the former deputy executive director, including for their personal take-home use. Now, the vehicle's sponsor signage in the covered area described the company as the official truck of the Kentucky Horse Park. However, state sponsorship regulations prohibit official endorsements of a particular company. Auditors found the Horse Park overall did not follow state requirements for obtaining sponsorships. The Horse Park's documentation was so poor that they could not even provide auditors a complete list of sponsors agreements in effect during the period we examined. Now, when testing sponsorships agreements, we found failure to properly document and fulfill sponsorship arrangements. We also found instances where particular sponsors were solicited prior to identifying and advertising Horse Park needs. Other sponsorships did not have a signed agreement in place or were signed but not dated. Now, that made it impossible to determine when the agreements began. We also found the Horse Park did not have written agreements and entities operating on site and did not properly secure food service concessioners. Food service concessioners have been hired mostly based on historical relationships rather than open and competitive procurement. For example, one vendor is permitted to operate a permanent concession stand in the middle of the park. This placement was not advertised for bid. Instead, it is reportedly based on the fact that the same vendor ran a small vending cart at the same location before the permanent structure was built. Now, our report also describes the failure to maintain effective separation between the horse park and the nonprofit Kentucky Horse Park Foundation. The Horse Park Foundation has its own board, management, and staff, and yet the horse park staff were being used as part of the foundation's Southern Light event held each Christmas season on the grounds. The park's business office employees handled cash receipts from the event. Also, during the course of the exam, auditors observed horse park employees putting up lights and preparing event materials. There was no agreement between the horse park and the foundation on reimbursement for employee labor provided or used on the grounds. State employees were working on the Southern Lights event on state time, thus they were performing work for a private fundraising activity on state time and being paid with state funds. Now, historically, the park and the foundation shared in profits from the Southern Lights. This practice stopped in 2013 when the agreement between the park and the foundation indicated there would be no charge to the foundation. The 2014 and 2015 agreements stated the park waived rent and its share of profits, which would go toward paying debt on new barns that were financed by the foundation. However, the barn project was supposed to have been funded by pledged donations. Additionally, the debt for the barns was paid in full in July of 2015. Despite the debt having been paid, the park also waived its share of profits from the Southern Lights event in 2016. Between 2009 and 2015, Southern Lights generated revenue of over $3 million for the foundation. Current management calculated the horse park's loss of admissions for the event could have been as much as $568,000. Now, the foundation's handling of the financing for new barns circumvented state procedures for incurring debt, potentially avoided compliance with state procurement and construction laws, and also surrendered an existing revenue stream for the park. Furthermore, we found poor controls at the horse park led to questionable hiring practices through temporary employment agencies. We discovered between fiscal year 2014 and 2016, the amount of money spent on temporary employment agencies increased almost 300% from $544,000 in 2014 to over $2 million in 2016. Now, one of these employees was the park's executive chef, who was hired through a temporary agency in March of 2016. From March to December of last year, this individual earned $57,890 in pay. Full-time employees with similar job descriptions at other state parks earned between $23,000 and $58,900 for the entire year of 2016. We believe, based on the amount of money earned over a 9-month period, this position at the horse park should be a full-time position instead of a temporary job. We also found overtime paid to temporary workers without documentation of approval by management. Finally, we found discrepancies between the invoices and the information entered into the state's accounting systems for actual hours and rates paid. The information entered in the state's accounting system was altered to fit contractual pay rates, which is misleading and unethical practice. These types of practices fail to meet a basic level of transparency that is incumbent upon all government agencies when spending taxpayers' dollars. It also greatly impairs the ability for analysis, oversight, and accountability. Now, our complete report is now available for review by the public on our website at auditor.ky.gov. Our findings illustrate why it is so troubling that taxpayers have paid over $24 million over the last 10 years to keep the horse park afloat. Now, not all agencies are capable of being run as a business and being profitable. However, all state agencies are capable of being ethical and well managed. I urge the new executive director of the horse park, the Kentucky Horse Park Commission, and the current administration to study our findings carefully and implement our recommendations to put the horse park on the path to financial sustainability. At this time, I'd like to introduce Secretary Parkson, who will give some remarks about our examination.
Thank you, Auditor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, good morning. We're really grateful for the hard work that Auditor Harmon and his team have put into this project. A year ago, when we came into office, we noticed we had some problems, and we reached out 12 months ago to the auditor for an audit. And so we are now 12 months later, and we found some things we were afraid we were going to find, and now we have to get to work to get them cleaned up. We have new management came in the 1st of June, a new executive director and a deputy, and a finance person, and we're starting to discover some things. We turned it over to the auditor, and so it's been a cooperative effort to make all of this to make all this work. But there's a lot of work to get done here. You know, improving financial stewardship is a top goal of this administration, and I'm pleased to announce that a lot of the things that were in this audit were turned over by our team to help get cleared up. This is an important step forward for the horse park. It's a road map for us, and we're committed to make all of these recommendations come to fruition very, very soon. So we appreciate very much your help.
Thank you. We appreciate you as well. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I think for the secretary.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any sense that the horse park should not be a state-run agency, that it should be privatized, as has been talked about with some other state?
There's been that kind of discussion for quite some time, but we have no plans to move forward on that. Right now, we have a lot of problems to get fixed, as he just pointed out. So we're not giving that any consideration right now at all.
Any consideration of a hotel at the horse park, which has been talked about for a long time?
That's been talked about for a long time, and we're still open to proposals, unsolicited proposals. We've not put out an RFP. There are some issues with the ground, with water restrictions and so on, and I think that's part of the reason it didn't happen earlier. But would like to hear if someone has a proposal, would sure entertain it, as we're doing with other entities around the state. We have a lot of opportunity with public-private partnerships, which is new legislation, which enables us to do this kind of thing. So would hope to get some proposals in on that very subject.
Based off these findings, who do you point the finger to? Whose fault is this, and what's the punishment?
This is an audit. Some of these issues are going to be referred to Ethics Commission, but these are more procedural, administrative failures, and I think the audit speaks for itself. So,
and I think based on the audit, obviously there were concerns in several different areas. So I think it's important to address all the ones that we have listed. So.
Any criminal liability possible?
The only referral that we had was to the Executive Branch Ethics Commission. Any other questions?
Does any of this information go back to the World Equestrian Games and any other events like Ichthus was held there maybe a couple of times? I know one time.
what place? I'm sorry.
The World Equestrian Games.
And I know Ichthus had an event at the horse park. Do any of these findings kind of surround big-time events at the horse park?
I was just going to say that we didn't look. I mean, we did look at some things that we audited, but we didn't look at those specific items, in that regard. So,
It's just really a lack of adherence to standard operating procedures and administrative policies, and there's a gap there, and that's what we've got to get fixed. And the good news is we're already well on the way of doing that. Two of the 8 findings are pretty much completed, and progress made in the other 6. So in 2 months, we'll come back to the auditor and his team and show the plan. But we're making progress on all that stuff.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. I was just going to say, I just wanted to add that we appreciate the cooperation, from the current management, from the current commission. We certainly appreciate the hard work of our auditors who went in and documented these items and found these items and confirmed these items. So we're very appreciative for cooperation. It makes it, I don't want to say it makes it easy, but it makes it a little bit easier to identify when current management is helpful.
Yeah, his team was sitting in a hot office with a leaky roof for 8 months, so we appreciate their dedication to getting the answers, and it's been very, very useful to us. So it's very helpful as we move forward.
Yes.
So you were saying the director rented a house on the property for $250 a month and lived there?
The deputy director.
Deputy
Director,
director.
yes.
So that is something that you cannot do? I mean, was it a part of that person's job?
I think the way it started years ago was that it's a 24-hour day operation. Someone has to be there in case there's a fire or, you know, horse gets sick or whatever. So that's a practice that's been going on a long time. We no longer need that, and so the new director has turned that building into an office building. We're renting it to a horse association, and they just moved in the last 2 or 3 months. We don't need a house there.
So how much money should that person have paid?
I have no idea. That was, it's a little bit different because it's in the middle of the horse operation, so he'd be called out at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever. So there's a plausible explanation for it, but we don't need that anymore. That's what happened in the past, and we're looking forward.
Any other questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
everybody coming.